All right, the Pokemon Presents for the 30th anniversary for Pokemon just wrapped up, and I wanted to go over some of the highlights, I guess, from the event, mostly things that are related to the games side, as there were just a bunch of things for Pokemon overall that were announced here, but they did indeed close out with Gen 10, and I'm going to go over that as well as some other things here today. So if you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button and subscribe if you're new. I think I'll do an entire breakdown of this in Newswave as a segment for Monday, just so we can go over everything involved there. Since at one point they rapid fired. I mean, they were just like boom, 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 boom. In like 5 minutes, they covered five different updates and games. And it was stuff for Pokemon Go, Pokemon Sleep, Cafe Remix. So not necessarily things that I'm as into, but I understand there are many people out there who do at least play those games or use those applications. So again, maybe I'll touch on all of that stuff on Monday. But let me start at the top here. Game Music Collection. So when they were first showing this, I kind of thought they were showing off a Game Boy Classic. Let me know if you also had that impression, because they had a little plastic OG Game Boy and they were switching out cartridges. But then they showed that it was a cartridge that had a screenshot on one side, and then on the opposite side they had, it looked like the cover art or the sticker that you'd normally see on the cartridge. And when they popped it in this little Game Boy, it would just play music, and it just seems like it's that it just plays the music from the game. They said there's like 45 different songs, and it's available today to buy, I guess, online. I haven't necessarily looked into the price for this thing yet, but what a random idea for, again, it's Pokemon merchandise. This stuff does very well. It's one of the ways that the Pokemon company makes stupid amounts of money, and it certainly looks like something that just collectors in general in the Pokemon universe will get a kick out of. But hey, if it was a classic Game Boy, like where you can play games on a cartridge, they were so close, like right there. I would have bought this thing immediately. So let me jump ahead now. Again, there was a lot of just other things that were mentioned here, World Championships and others, but I wanted to jump ahead here to Nintendo Switch Online, because we are getting one of the Pokemon games on the GameCube in March. And I was kind of bringing up the idea of Pokemon XD being the first one that gets dropped. People were wondering maybe it'd be Coliseum. No, it is Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness, which has a very interesting single player in this game. And it's about shadow Pokemon. And I think there was only 40 or 50 Pokemon that were available in the game, but it is a more like linear story driven experience, and it's very different from any of the other Pokemon games, really. And I think it's pretty cool that it is going into the service March 2026. So it could be early in the month. I'm thinking it might be maybe mid or second half of the month. So we very well could be 2 or 3 weeks away from this dropping in. But it was expected for Pokemon Day to have one of those two at least being mentioned here. I would have liked to have seen them shadow drop it, but I would have liked to have seen them just drop it into the service today. But they had another game that, of course, they were releasing, which is Fire Red and Leaf Green. Those are available today. I don't know if they're out right this minute, but at any time now, they should be available when you're seeing this video. And they had to confirm to me one thing to really set this apart from the idea of just emulate them, and that would be home support. And this was already shown in the description for the game when they first listed them on the eShop, but then it was taken away. And the running theory was it would be available after launch, but not when they first dropped these things on Pokemon Day. And that seems to be typical with some of these releases. I don't think ZA has home support yet, but they did show that these games, Fire Red and Leaf Green, will indeed be able to transfer Pokemon to home, which will then allow you to transfer them to other newer titles. Like they showed Scarlet, they showed Violet, ZA, which I guess that means we should see home support here pretty soon for ZA, as well as to Pokemon Champions. So to me, that immediately makes Fire Red and Leaf Green much more interesting for people who are really into collecting the different Pokemon and would like to leverage that generation for some of these newer titles and send Pokemon back and forth then. So that is quite interesting, and I'm curious if that will make people who maybe weren't interested in it previously maybe take another look at Fire Red and Leaf Green, even though it has that $20 price tag. I just think the idea of being able to transfer Pokemon up to the newer generation immediately raises the value for people with Fire Red and Leaf Green on the Switch. Pokemon Champions, it was next, It's coming out April 2026 for the Switch, mobile release later this year, and it just seems to be an expanded like Pokemon Stadium, and that's kind of how it's already been pitched anyway. And they showed off people just making their own little brackets and playing against each other in person, but then also playing on the bus or the subway or something on your cell phone. So I mean, it's a concept that is what Pokemon is mostly built on, next to, of course, raising the Pokemon, battling them. So it's just another avenue for them to release, yes, kind of their own live service game, but leaning into one of the core pillars of Pokemon. So I'm sure it'll do well. But even like the Pokemon trading card game, I was playing that for a while for the Pocket Edition on the phones, and then I just kind of fell out of it. I don't know if it's just there's so many different cards or people were saying there weren't enough. You get kind of overwhelmed with the amount of stuff, and there's only so many battles I was doing against the computer. I think Champions will find an audience there. And then the closeout. Pokemon Pokopia. That seems to be how it's said. It's a little thing, but I was saying Pokopia. No, it seems to be Pokopia. That's how they pronounce it here. So now I'm changing up. I mean, okay, I was off on that one. Pokopia. It's out next week, March 5th, and they showed off a few other things. There's a stereo in the game, DJ wrote 'em, and there's a chef that'll cook stuff for you, and you can give to your Pokemon. And then you take your Pokemon to other towns through multiplayer. So I do think Pokopia is going to be actually pretty big. It's leaning so much into Minecraft and what the newer generation of gamers are really into right now, but then also mixing Pokemon in. This is one of those times where I said, okay, the Pokemon company actually recognized a current trend very well and are trying to design a game around it. So I I think this is going to pull in a new audience at times to Pokemon going forward, and I would expect some pretty big sales out of the game. Again, it's coming out next week. It is only Switch 2, so that could be something that drives sales for the console throughout 2026 because Pokemon wins and waves. So this was the final reveal, and people were curious if it was going to be a full-on cinematic trailer, and they don't show anything from the game. No, they actually did, and they did some quick sweeping shots, and they showed off the starters. It's the typical water, fire, and grass types, but that's tried and true. That's what I would expect anyway going into it. And so we have Brout, Pombon, and say Gekwa. That last one was tripping me up, the gecko. But I know people are gonna look at Pombon, I'm sure, and be all about it's the fire type, but also it's like this little dog with like a bunch of like hair that's all poofed up. I will say Gekwa did catch my eye a bit there. Maybe because the name looks so weird and sounds weird to pronounce. But I don't know. I feel like the gecko type could turn into could. You think of the final evolution for these things, and I guess Pombon could turn into some crazy like fire dog. I don't know. I'm thinking that Gekwa becoming this massive, like crazy looking water gecko or something. But it definitely looks better than Scarlet and Violet, which I want to preface by saying, man, the bar was low for those. And you know what? I do wonder if the Pokemon Company actually reflected on that. Because the game is not coming out this year, and I was a little surprised when they flashed 2027 at the end of this thing. And look, I picked up Scarlet and Violet when it came out on the Switch 1, and it was a rough experience to say the least. It was technically very, very undercooked. And that was a prevailing theme coming out of that for people's opinions around the game. And it's so clear that the Pokemon Company and Nintendo heard this because they addressed it through official communication, saying that they would work to patch and fix it. Guess what the patch was? It was the Switch 2, because the games do run a lot better on the Switch 2. They're near perfect in terms of performance, and you can even say just visual clarity. So Nintendo really hasn't used DLSS in any of their first party games, but Pokemon Scarlet and Violet with the Switch 2 update does use DLSS, and it targets 60 frames per second, and it basically hits it all the time. So this to me is them looking at that and going, you know what? This game would have been, it would have been a lot better if they could have had it as a Switch 2 release. It came out in 2022, so that just wasn't feasible. But I think they learned a lot from that situation, and instead of even trying to push this thing out 4 years after Scarlet and Violet, which is already a year longer than going from Sword and Shield to Scarlet and Violet, it seems like they're at bare minimum going 4.5 years. I don't know if this is holiday 27. They didn't say. They just said global simultaneous release for 2027, and it is a Switch 2 exclusive title. So this could be first half of next year. So we very well could be more than a year out still, but I don't. They don't need to launch in the holiday if they don't want to. But I understand the holiday season has a lot of hype, a lot of buying power already, and then you layer Pokemon on top of that. But look what happens whenever ZA released, and people were comparing it to Arceus, but it sold 5 million copies just about in a few days. So they can legitimately release Pokemon whenever they want and it'll do well. Now, in terms of the visuals, yes, it looked a lot better than Scarlet and Violet. Just compare the water effects. And that sounds funny because we've had good-looking water for a long time, but we haven't had good-looking water for a long time at all in any of these 3D Pokemon games. I mean, I guess back in the day we had the IGN review, there's too much water, but there was only so much you could do with the Game Boy Advance. Now, though, there were actual waves. Like there was tessellation on the water. Like there was actual effects and depth to it. And they showed off different biomes. So you had like the forest. There was one like that looked like it was almost in underground, sort of volcano with lava. And there's a tropical theme. So there is a lot going on here. And they even went under the water. Just maybe to convey the idea of further exploration beyond just on the surface level. And it looks like they are going, at least from what I was taking away from this trailer, in a more open world setting with your character running between these biomes, maybe in real time, like it's all interconnected without any major loading screens. And it did look somewhat real time, even in the capturing, maybe even the battling. So I'm curious. This could finally be what people were hoping Scarlet and Violet would end up as here with Winds and Waves. So still a lot of information we need here, but we're potentially still a year out. So they have plenty of time to really show off this game more and more. And if it ends up being holiday 27, that would be crazy because 5 years, but hopefully that actually pays off because as we've seen, they can further monetize these things with DLC and others provided the base game is high quality. So you know what? Somewhat impressed by Winds and Waves with Game Freak being attached to it. The fact that they learned and that they're not trying to push this game out too early has me very, very optimistic on the release here. So here's hoping they have some other interesting wrinkles for the game beyond just, oh, it actually looks like it somewhat belongs in the Switch 2 generation. But let me know what you guys thought about this Pokemon Presents down below, whether it's the NSO GameCube release with XD. Did your opinion change on Fire Red and Leaf Green with home support? And what about Winds and Waves? Where are you with that coming off of Scarlet and Violet, with this game potentially taking 4.5 to 5 years to develop, at least get released after Scarlet and Violet? Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.